Hello and welcome to the Bike the UK from S podcast. We had an episode that you may have already seen where I spoke to the founder of Bike the UK from S, and I was the new guy. And I'm very excited that we have an even newer new guy who is going to be talking to us today. So I'm Felix Young. I'm the UK program manager for Bike the UK from S, and we're going to be talking today to Tommy Blake, who, well, Tommy, I'll leave you to introduce yourself. So, Tommy, tell us a little bit about yourself, who you are, and what your role is in Bike the UK from S.
Yeah, hi there. As Felix says, I'm Tommy, and I am the UK placement student this year with Bike UK for MS. So I currently study sports science coaching and PE at Loughborough University, and I've just finished my second year of study, and I'm now joined the charity for a placement year.
And Tommy, you're not only our placement student and going to be working hard all year to deliver well, you've already been on the trips, and we'll talk about a bit later about this summer's trips, but you're going to be working hard alongside myself and James to get things lined up for 2024. But you are far from new to Bike the UK from S in the last few months. Can you tell me a little bit about your first experience and when you first joined the charity?
Definitely. So back in 2022, in my first year of uni, Bike UK for MS was actually a charity partner of our university's RAG organisation, which is a charity arm of lots of UK universities. And through that, they were advertising the North Coast 500 trip. And I thought, oh, that looks like a good challenge. Go see Scotland and do it for a good cause. So I kind of signed up and summer 22, joined the charity riding NC 500 with a group of friends and kind of getting to meet everyone involved with the charity.
And, and
Um,
and what was the specific link that brought you to the Bike the UK from S to your attention? Was it the rag fair? Was it a friend was doing it? Was it through the triathlon club? What was the specific thing that kind of first brought it into your vision?
yeah, so I just went along to the rag fair the uni ran. I kind of had a look around at all the trips and noticed there was a cycling one. As a keen cyclist, that kind of caught my eye, and then saw that it was up in Scotland, which was a second tick, and then saw it was for Bike UK for MS, and multiple sclerosis wasn't a charity I heard or a cause I'd heard much about. But I had a kind of went away, had a bit of a read up, had a look, and actually thought this kind of ticks all three boxes, being a really good cause, a place I want to go, and kind of a cycling challenge is always up my street.
And we both know, and we can talk a little bit about your background as an athlete and as a cyclist. But had you gone to that rag fair thinking that yes, I wanted to commit to some kind of cause on just on general principle, or was it just out of interest that you'd kind of gone along on a whim almost?
I definitely wanted to, feel like I was giving something back to some good cause, and it was kind of like it was a good opportunity to go see the options I had, if that made sense.
Excellent, and we'll talk a little bit about your athletic prowess. So, Tommy, you're a very competent cyclist, very competent triathlete. Tell us a little bit about your sporting background as well.
So yeah, I've kind of been doing sport on and off most of my life, and more recently, I've kind of focused on triathlon, and I race here through Loughborough University, and um, do a mix of cycling and triathlon, representing the uni a bit, and doing some races for myself.
So, beyond racing, like you said, you're a sports person, you're a cyclist throughout, and so hence wanting to go on the trip to Scotland, the North Coast 500 trip. And what was it? You said that Scotland appealed, so obviously cycling appealed. What was it about traveling in Scotland, traveling and doing the North Coast 500 that was there's the particular kind of thing that sold you that you wanted to go and do it?
So it was the Highlands of Scotland is a place I've always kind of wanted to visit, having kind of seen it in when I was younger, watching nature documentaries or whatever, or and kind of seeing suggested posts and reels on social media as kind of a true wilderness in some cases, parts of it, and actually getting to visit and explore a completely different landscape that you can't necessarily find elsewhere in the UK. Um, and yeah, it's always had a draw to me to kind of get out into nature properly. And I really felt like it gave me that opportunity.
And it's not just the North Coast 500, the coast itself, which you've now I said you've route led with myself, you've route led twice this summer and ridden as a rider. But I happen to know you're a big fan of the Cairngorms, Tommy. Can you tell us a little bit about that as well?
yeah, again, it's that connection to kind of the wilderness of Scotland. It's actually a place I visited with my family a couple of times, and and somewhat annoyingly, we've only ever been there for like 1 or 2 days at a time, so I've never had the chance to properly explore. But yeah, I've always really wanted to kind of get out into it. And every time I've driven up to the North Coast 500, which is now 3 separate times for the trips I've done, I drive past the cairngorms and just think how beautiful a place it is. And I'm only going around the outside then.
Yes, quite. It's not bad from the car, but it's even better from the bike or on foot, right? Isn't it? And so the North Coast 500 trip. So it's 8 days of riding up on the north coast of Scotland, and it's a trip that's become a real staple for Bike the UK from S since it was introduced. I think it was your year the first year we did Bike the UK from S. Sorry, it was your year the first year we did the North Coast 500.
I believe it had been done 1 year before, so I think we were the second year, but don't quote me on that.
I'd say it's on the record now. There's no getting away from it. So the North Coast 500, 8 days of riding, 500 miles as the clues in the name around the north coast of Scotland, and it's a really spectacular route. Both Tommy and I have just been on the trip just in earlier in September, and there will be a trip in 2024 from the 27th of July until the 3rd of August, and the sign-ups are open for that now. If you are already thinking, like Tommy was, oh, cycling Scotland and a great cause, ticks all the boxes. But if we think back to 2022, when you rode it, Tommy, let's dig into a little bit of some of the experience that you had, because part of this trip, part of what makes that trip so appealing is, like you said, the stunning, spectacular scenery, and the opportunity to ride through it and really experience it. So, what's the one particular standout kind of moment from the trip for you?
Oh, that's a hard one. I can give you a top three.
Oh, we'll go for. I'll allow you top three. It's your podcast after all.
Um, yeah, so I think one of the things that was kind of the most special moments of it for me was actually pretty much the whole team on the night three in John O'Groats, or night two of riding, night three of the trip, if that makes sense.
Yep.
We all went down to the beach, just away from the campsite where we stay in John O'Groats, and as a team, kind of sat down on the beach, watched the sunset, talking, and it was a really nice experience that you were there with a group of people doing this challenge for the cause, but at the same time, it was just like you were there with a group of like-minded people all taking on the same challenge, getting to take in some absolutely beautiful nature. So that was a really big part of that, just getting to
And
spend time with the team.
that's something that I found on the trip we've just done, where actually, like you said, it is a team, right? You're riding your own ride, and the way we run the trips is that everyone could ride their own pace. It's not one big group ride, but actually there is that huge camaraderie. You're sharing that experience with people, and that was hugely powerful. Combined with, as you said, that kind of escapism a little bit, being a long way away from all of the rigmarole of modern life in some ways, and you watched the sunset. I sat on probably that same set of rocks and watched a couple of seals bobbing in and out of the waves while we were up there early in September. So no, it's a truly special place, and that dynamic of sharing it with everyone is really special, isn't it?
Definitely. And yeah, so I guess the next bit would be actually getting to tackle the Applecross climb, which is I think one of the most iconic climbs in the United Kingdom, and it's it's probably it's the longest road climb in the United Kingdom, but it's actually arguably one of the best climbs, I think, in the UK as well, given that it's not too steep a gradient, but it's just long and winding, and it takes you up to an amazing view looking out over the rest of the Applecross Peninsula and actually over to the Isle of Skye as well. So getting to tackle that was something that was always on my bucket list. So to get to ride that was amazing.
And you're one ahead of me because it's still on my bucket list. I've driven a van up it now, but I've not got to ride it. But yeah, and not only riding up Applecross Pass, Tommy, but this year as a route leader, you took an opportunity to tackle it in another way.
Yeah, so this year didn't have my bike with me, unfortunately. So I thought, well, how else can I manage this? So I ran up it, which seemed very sensible in July or August, I should say, on the first trip I did this summer when it was a nice, sensible temperature, and that was quite fun. I ran up it again in September, and it was a little bit warmer, and I did wonder quite why I decided to do that, but yeah,
And
it's
you
still
evidence that it can be too hot sometimes in Scotland. Not even too hot, but very hot, right?
Yeah, it's definitely maybe not what you'd expect from the Highlands, but it's quite nice actually. I think I've now seen it in pretty much all weathers, which is quite nice. It shows that, as you say, it can be nice and sunny up there as well.
And you touch on that, and it's something that must be said about Scotland and Scottish weather, and particularly the west coast and the north coast. The weather can be quite a challenge because the rides aren't just a cycling holiday. There's an amazing experience, there's amazing scenes, amazing roads to ride, but the fundamental point of Bike the UK from S is that we are taking on a cycling challenge to raise money for a great cause, and the weather can be one of the challenging factors, can't it?
Definitely, it can really vary. So the year I rode, I think we experienced all four seasons, you could say. And we had some beautiful sun for the first couple of days up the East Coast, had some slightly challenging winds as we kind of headed across the top of Scotland, going from east to west, and had a few days of rain, a few days of pushing it a bit further than rain, you could say. But then you also get the days where it just clears up as you go over the brow of a hill and you open out into just some stunning scenery dappled in sunlight. So although it can definitely be challenging with the weather, and that's something which actually makes it arguably all the more special, that you do get to experience it in all sorts of conditions. But it it almost shines no matter what the weather is, which is, yeah, it was weird to be riding in the wind and rain and thinking, do you know what? This almost makes it look more beautiful. But there you are.
Yeah, well, and I've only seen it in beautiful weather because when we did the trip in September, it was a stunning week, and there was a number of you talk about cresting, and there's lots of kind of crest where you brings you out into a new world and real jaw dropping moments, jaw dropping scenery. And but I do know what you mean when it comes to the adversity adding something to the conditions, because when I rode the Bike the UK from S trip in 2014, which is coming up to 10 years ago now, the we had really great weather for a large part of the trip as well, and it was wonderful. And we had a wonderful time. And then we got down into Cornwall and Devon in the last couple of days, and there was flash floods and there's just torrential downpours. And actually, those live as long in the memory as the beautiful weather, because actually it was just absurd, right? Like the absurdity of the situation. I remember everyone was just in hysterics as we're kind of tackling these kind of these sudden kind of this sudden change in conditions. And they do say sometimes, don't they, that if you don't like the weather in the west coast of Scotland, just got to wait a bit and it's going to change any minute. So that's a positive when it is challenging weather. But we talk about kind of the challenge and the cause and why the rides happen. And it isn't a cycling holiday; it's a cycling challenge to raise money for a great cause. And another part of the trips, of course, is meeting some of the people that can benefit or that do benefit from the money that's raised, and the MS groups. And both you and I, Tommy, when we first came into Bike the UK from MS, we rode as riders without a direct connection to the condition. But can you tell me a little bit about what it was like, and what you learned from those opportunities to meet up with the members of the MS Society groups up in the Highlands, in this case for the North Coast trips, both as a rider and then more recently as a route leader?
Certain. So actually, that was going to be my third part of my top three, was actually getting to meet the MS groups. And yeah, so on my trip, we unfortunately in the Highlands, with it being such a big place with kind of smaller groups of populations dotted about. In my first year riding, we only met one MS group in Inverness at the end. But actually, that was yet again one of my highlights from the trip. So they came down, kind of celebrated the end of our ride with us, but actually it gave me a really good opportunity to gain that bit more of a connection to the condition and learn a bit more about it. So I'd kind of found out a little bit about MS and like actually what multiple sclerosis is, with it being where the immune system attacks the sheaths around the nerves. But I hadn't really. It's one thing reading about it; it's another thing actually hearing people share their stories, and that was kind of quite a special experience to kind of not only to get to meet them and find out a bit about them, but actually it kind of really drives home what you're riding for, and I think that's something which makes the trips a little bit more special, to get to meet those groups. And luckily enough, as you kind of alluded to, this year we were able to meet a few more groups going around the Highlands, and yeah, it really adds to the feel of the trip. And kind of when you're finding it tough, it kind of reminds you actually what you're riding for as such.
Yeah, and you mentioned earlier about within the riding team about how you end up with that sense of community, that sense of shared experience and that teamwork. And the members in the MS groups can't share that experience because well, so we do have members in the MS groups that do riders, but particularly often the ones we meet at the meetups often can't, and so they get to take a little part of our experience and come on that journey with us as well. And in particular, like you said, there's been a few groups now that we've started to kind of meet on a more regular basis, and a few that we've met multiple times on a single trip. And what that has meant is that they are starting to build a proper community where we the alumni and the route leaders and all the riders and the trips are starting to kind of have that commonality for these people, for these members of the groups that they've seen week on week, year on year potentially. And it's been a really special thing. And if I think all the way back to my trip back in 2014, we met the Bath MS Society group, and that was the only group we met back in 2014 because we were still establishing those connections. But now we've got to the point where certainly on the Land's End John O'Groats trip, it's almost every day there's an MS group all the way through the country knitted together through the riders travelling across the whole of the UK. And I think that's one of the really amazing things about Bike the UK from MS and what we do as a charity is that it's a small scale thing. It's a very local operation in a lot of ways, but actually it's building those real personal connections at a small scale, as well as the kind of broader contributions to the MS Society on a national scale and beyond. And you said what do we ride for, which I think is a very, very kind of crucial part of it. But also, one of the really nice things I find about meeting those MS groups and knowing that a lot of the money that's raised goes directly back to those groups in specific cases is also who you're riding for, and actually having specific people that maybe you'll have met in a previous year as a rider and you're back route leading, or specific people that you'll have met on the ride, and then as you go through and you might have a bad day of weather or you might be feeling like you've had a bad day on the bike, and it's not just the what, but it's the who you're riding for, and those meetups, the MS groups, were always for me about really making it a really personal thing. For me as a rider back, like I said, without a direct connection, but we also like I said, have riders that either themselves or family and friends are directly affected by MS on the trips, and that's been the case for a number of the trips you've ridden on, hasn't it, Tommy?
Yeah, definitely. So, um, yeah, when I've been riding and when I've been route leading, there's the team's been a mix of people like myself who may not have had an initial link when they signed up, and as you say, family and friends, people with MS themselves, and yeah, it's also that I know I'm harping on about the community and the shared experience, but yet again, it just gives you another opportunity to kind of engage more with the kind of the condition, no matter what background you come from and where you come in. But yeah,
And so you've ticked most of the boxes: rider, route leader, alumni, and so on. And now you're involved on a day-to-day basis as the placement student for Bike the UK from us. And tell me a little bit about again why you thought that was something that would work really well for you as you kind of progress through your course.
so kind of I knew I wanted to do a placement year as part of my degree to kind of get some experience in the world of work alongside just studying. And but I was never quite sure what I wanted to do with it. I knew I wanted to be involved in something where I felt like I was contributing to giving back in some way or helping people in some way. But I was never really sure. And then I did this trip back in 2022. I rode the NC 500 and kind of um, met Ella, the previous placement student with Bike UK for MS, through that, and kind of really felt I was really on board with what the charity was doing. And it was obviously within cycling, a sport I feel quite passionate about, not just at a competing level, but actually as a vehicle for people to, in this case, raise money through, but just to something people can use to get active and hopefully find the kind of same joy in that I found. And it kind of bubbled away in the back of my mind as I was looking at placement options. And I thought, actually, if I reach out, this could be something that not only provides me opportunities to be within the world of sport, in this case, within more of a participation focus, if that makes sense, but also to not only be giving back in that I can be helping people in terms of getting ready to ride, providing advice if they want it, and all these kind of things, but actually giving back in an extra sense through being involved within the charitable organisation for a cause that I've actually grown to be quite passionate about, as you say, through those personal connections I've made through the trips. And that kind of, I guess that's why I chose to do the placement. But as you mentioned, kind of particularly why it worked for me as well is it's uh, it's quite nice that it is quite flexible. So we have the trip season throughout summer, which generally spans from July to September, and to get to go and lead those trips and get back into that, well, maintain that community each year and go and meet those people from S groups again each year on year was definitely a really appealing part of it. But also the flexibility in the fact that it's not going into sitting in the office 9 to 5, but actually going out and talking to people at rag fairs. A lot of it being focused around building those connections and talking to potential new signups and all this kind of thing. It was nice that that was something I could also fit around my training as a student athlete myself as well. So it kind of ticked all the boxes as such.
It is, and there's again, it's funny. You and I, there's a lot of similarities because I did a placement year as my part of my degree course back in 2012, 2013, and I spent a year living out in Canada. So different placement in a lot of ways, but actually the same things that you described. I knew I wanted to do a placement year. I've said ever since, and I'd be interested to hear what you think in nearly 12 months' time, Tommy. But I said I would recommend doing a placement to anyone. I'd never do one again because it was really tough. And being a student kind of on a placement is a hard role because you're having to do a lot of learning, a lot of development, whilst also working hard and covering a lot of ground. But again, the same kind of things for me is that actually kind of I could never imagine myself, and I've always struggled to do the kind of the office job side of things. I quite like talking to people, hence why I ramble on podcasts like this, and I spend so much time chatting to people on the rides. But that dynamic of trying to kind of build that community, build those connections is a really powerful thing, and actually is a really incredibly valuable skill that now that I'm into my 30s and later on into life, you realise that that is a common thread that goes between huge amounts of career and business and every part of development. It's about building connections and maintaining them, and that's exactly what the core of the placement is all about. So I'm very hopeful that you're going to have a very enjoyable year, but also a year that's really gives you a lot of development opportunities in terms of how you can build up your repertoire as a young person. And then you also mentioned about how your kind of your coaching background, your experience is a little bit more kind of tilted towards competitive sport or performance sport, and actually the opportunity to work in it's not quite coaching per se, but actually coaching and supporting people in a more participation focused angle. But again, I hark back to some of my memories where I was a community cycling coach for a number of years in Bath, and actually learning how to work with a really diverse range of people gives you a skill set so that when you've got someone that might be a young athlete, actually some of the skills you learn in supporting riders on a Bike the UK from S trip might just be the thing that hits the right buttons to support someone that needs that support in a performance setting as well. So again, it's what
Def-
placement's all about: development in a wide range of opportunities.
Definitely on that last point as well. It's one of the things that like you get to meet people from all walks of life from all over the country, or indeed in some cases, people travel over from abroad. For example, we have a few alumni that regularly travel over from America to take part in our UK trips, and actually meeting these people from all different life circumstances to yourself. As someone who is interested in, as you mentioned, the coaching side of it, it's so valuable to get that experience and find out their experiences, like you say. So yeah, it's definitely a really, really valuable thing.
And you've had a first experience on the quote unquote other side of the fence, so to speak, or the other side of the trestle table, it may be, at the RAG fair at Manchester University last week. And you said it was at the RAG fair at the Raise and Give fair at Loughborough Uni that you first came across Bike the UK from S. So can you tell me a little bit about your experience of being on the other side of the coin, so to speak, the other side of the table, meeting potential students that may be interested in taking part in the trip last week?
Yeah, definitely. So I kind of well, yeah, I got the train up to Manchester after we've been. So we're the official, one of the official charity partners for RAG for next year, and went up, set up my table, and it was just, it was great to get to spend the day kind of sharing a bit about the charity, sharing my passion, and actually, so it's really nice to see that you get plenty of people who just want to find out more about the cause as much as they're looking at all the challenges and that opportunity to kind of yeah, hopefully try and inspire a little bit the same uh, what I found in the through the rag. It's
And
a
and did you find
special
it
opportunity.
did you find it hard work? Because I did trade shows on my placement, and I found it was I found it really hard. Like there was a lot to gain. There was a huge amount to gain for the company I was working for. I gained a lot in learning how to kind of speak to people and come forward and present well. But I found them really hard days. Was it a tough day, or was it took it
It
all in
was it
stride?
was it was tricky to not tricky is the wrong word. It took me a little while to get into my stride. I was a little nervous of being the first time I'd done a at least done a rag fair myself. I was quite lucky in that I'd previously, as an alumni, come along and helped out a couple of the Loughborough ones. But it's definitely a little intimidating being sat there in the union for the first time, um, thinking, "Oh my, I'm representing the charity to all these people." But actually, um, I definitely kind of relaxed into it a lot more because if you've not noticed, I'm quite keen to talk about cycling and the charity and the beautiful places we run the trip. So kind of once I got into talking to people, I kind of relaxed and felt a lot more comfortable with it. Although I must admit, it is a tiring day settling into it, but also it feels really worthwhile if that makes sense.
Excellent. And what are you looking forward to on the rest of the placement year? Is there anything in particular you think, I'm really excited to do something new, or is there something that you're really passionate about that you already are really looking forward to doing over the next 12 months within the placement role?
Definitely. So there's a couple of things actually. So I guess the one of the first things I'm really looking forward to is we're looking to do a bit more of an off-season offer this year with some activities to keep alumni engaged and some kind of potentially some crazy challenges coming up as we look towards the end of this year. And I'm really excited to kind of get behind running those and kind of hoping to get some people engaged with maybe at a time of year it's tricky to motivate yourself to get out and do that bit of exercise and provide a way that maybe a challenge which gets people involved. But then the other part I'm really looking forward to is actually getting the chance to kind of leave my legacy as such and actually be involved with the running of a new trek um, for Loughborough Rag actually. So extra close to home being my university, and that's we're doing our first ever Bike UK Crossing Borders trip going to London to Paris.
And you mentioned London to Paris, which we'll talk about a bit more later, but it's also a quite an important year for Bike the UK from S overall. Not only is Tommy Blake the placement student, which is obviously a huge huge deal for anyone, but it's going to be 10 years since the first ever Bike the UK from S trip next year. So not only are we planning these harebrained challenges for the purpose of raising lots of money and also getting lots of people involved with what we're trying to achieve, but we're also going to be spending a bit of time looking back and celebrating the last 10 years of the charity. And keep your eyes peeled because there will have been some stuff potentially over the last few weeks looking back at some of the trips in previous years. And what we want to try and do over the next kind of 12 months as we go through this 10-year anniversary for the charity is take a look about some of the people that have made Bike UK from S what it is up to this point. So like I said, we've got a podcast, we've got an interview with James, who was the founder all that time ago, and talking to you now, Tommy. So if you think you're someone that's been part of Bike the UK from S over the last 10 years and you've got a story to tell, short or long, then please get in touch. We'd love to chat and share that story as we look back over the last 10 years of the charity and everything that has been achieved. But that's looking back. Well, we'll be looking ahead to the challenge in the winter, looking back over the last 10 years. But looking ahead a little bit further, we've got the summer trips coming up that we mentioned, Tommy. We've got a Land's End to John O'Groats trip in July 2024, the North Coast 500 trip that we've already mentioned in the end of July, early August. We've got the C2C trip, which will be towards the end of August 2024. And then finally, the second iteration of our Welsh trip, Alon Las Cymru, from Holyhead down to Cardiff. It's at the I think it's the beginning of September or the very end of July, very end of August from memory. I should have the dates in front of me. That would be much more professional. And then also the London to Paris trip that Tommy mentioned is going to be a first time for the charity. Tell me what you're looking forward to, Tommy. Looking ahead to next summer, where you're going to be in charge of keeping the show on the road.
Yeah, one thing I'm really looking forward to is so kind of through this summer I got experience as a ride leader on the trips this year. I'm really looking forward to kind of building on that and actually taking on the head ride leader role kind of on the road and getting to see Land's End to John O'Groats as a trip I haven't actually been on yet, as well as Alon Las Cymru. They're two trips I'm really looking forward to being involved with and experiencing. But yeah, I'm really looking forward to kind of building on the experiences this year to kind of hopefully make the trips even better if I can, in terms of just finding being there to support the riders and kind of doing a better job. I'm not promising people soup at the wrong times for anyone who was on the July NC500 trip this year. I may have blundered about a cafe being open when it wasn't, so I'm hoping to iron out a few of those mistakes.
There's nothing worse than the unfulfilled promise of warm soup on a cold cycling day, hey?
Indeed.
And like you said, you've already learned in the trips that you've route led, supporting Ella, who was the previous placement student. And I've got a question for you because I thought it was quite an interesting one. So you and I were both route leading on the trip a few weeks ago, earlier in September, and the position you were put in, let's say almost in a way by myself, is that you were relatively new on placement. You kind of a few weeks into the role, and then you were the head route leader, so you were in charge of the trip, and you had your boss, me, as one of the route leading team supporting you. Was that an interesting situation to be in, as someone that's newly started a placement, to be effectively in charge of not just everyone on the trip, but also the person that's managing your placement on the first few weeks of your job?
Yeah, it's definitely slightly, not nerve wracking, but I was slightly nervous to start with. Actually, yeah, it wasn't. It was never a problem, and actually on the trip, it never felt weird, if that makes sense. Actually, one of the good things is, although you have a head route leader, the whole route leader team kind of, it generally works together really well, and actually, it never felt like I was never having to chase up to get this done, to get that done. It was kind of, it just worked really smoothly. So I was kind of, yeah, it never felt too bad.
It's a sign of a good leader that you managed to have everything working smoothly without too much stress. And I only ask because I was intrigued, because if I think back to when I was in the same place when I was on my placement, I thought, oh yeah, would it be weird to be told to kind of take charge, take authority, and especially in the context of where you might be telling your boss what to do. But I said from my placement, and we certainly saw with Ella last year, that kind of ability to take a leadership role is something that doesn't always come up as an opportunity early in someone's career, where they might be kind of within a large organization or managed by various layers of people that kind of take those kind of big decisions. But actually, one of the things I think is really, I'm really excited about the placement role that Ella took on, and then you're on, is that you do end up in a position of authority where you have to make decisions and learn how to maybe refine some of those decisions about how you manage things. But it's a really important part of developing as a young person, and like I said, in a coaching sense, as well as in a sporting kind of participation sense as well. So looking forward to the trips over the summer, and let's talk about London to Paris. So like we said, it's a first for the charity. We're going to attempt to, I say attempt to, we're going to successfully, but we are planning a process by which we're going to take Bike the UK for MS en France. We're going to go across a international border. You mentioned borders earlier, but obviously we cross Scottish English borders and Wales English
Of
borders. But
course.
that's a whole topic for another time. But yeah, tell us a little bit about kind of. What you think the new challenges will be delivering a trip that goes across to Paris rather than a domestic one.
Yeah, so it's something I'm really looking forward to. But as you mentioned, there's obviously the challenges associated with, as you say, crossing that international border and kind of just thinking logistically about getting people, bikes, mechanics kit, and all this kind of thing. Not only to Paris, but then of course how it all comes back. But I think, yeah, the other thing, of course, is going to be just managing a team in a country which, of course, speaks another language, and
How's your French,
kind
Tommy?
of Duolingo is going to be getting a good bit of activity this year, I fear. Um, but it's yeah, I think it's going to be a really good opportunity to. Obviously, there's, as you meant, as we've kind of just discussed, a few new challenges, but I feel like if anything, that's almost more exciting. That gives us more opportunities to kind of develop the charity more, because each challenge you learn something new to add to what you do in the future. So yeah, I'm really looking forward to it.
No, it's going to be exciting, and like we said, we've got a raft of alumni over the last 10 years, and we know that lots of people have already said, oh, I'm quite interested in coming and helping supporting that one because it's a little bit different, a little bit new. Those that maybe have been on or supported trips like the North Coast 500 or Lands and John O'Groats already this year go, oh, actually, I've never done a trip in that way. So if you're interested in helping out on the London to Paris trip or any of the other trips, whether you're an alumni or not, we need volunteer route leaders for all the trips next summer. So if you think, oh, I can't ride those trips for whatever reason, but I'd love to be involved in some capacity, please just give us a shout, and we will get you onto the route leader team ready to support the riders that are riding. So, Tommy, a final thing, and I've done this for James, who we spoke to before, and then Rosie, who is another podcast that if it's not already out, it'll be out soon. I wrap up, and I haven't warned you of this bit. Some quick fire questions. So I'm going to give you a little round of some quick questions. Just looking for a very short answer. Don't need to go into any great depth unless you really want to. But here comes the first few questions. So, Tommy, if you could choose Bike the UK for MS, Lands and John O'Groats, or a swim the UK for MS where you had to swim across from Dover to Calais, what would you do?
Definitely be Land's End to John O'Groats. Not a big fan of sea swimming. Too many
Oh,
fish.
too many fish, scare the fish. Okay, there we go. So he's a swimmer, but only in a competitive sense. What is your favourite route of the Bike UK from S route?
Of all the ones I've experienced so far, definitely MC 500. I've already mentioned how much I love the Highlands. So yeah, and it's also been the first one I did. It's pretty special. Holds good memories.
Nice, excellent. So Solden, you're going to be looking forward to going back again, I guess. That in that case, which of the rides that you've not experienced do you think you will enjoy route leading the most?
I'm really looking forward to Londonderry Cymru. Wales is another place I love visiting. I've actually got family links to South Wales on my mum's side as well, so it's going to be quite special to get to lead the trip there.
Can you pronounce that train station on Anglesey that has the longest train station name in the UK?
Not a chance.
Okay, we'll work on that for next year. We'll work on that for next year. And one final one. If you had to sum up your experience of Bike the UK from S, both as a rider and as a route leader, and I guess also as a kind of as the placement student, but kind of combining those into one, in one sentence, I'll give you a sentence. What would that sentence be?
That's a tricky one. I think it's been a really rewarding, challenging, but yeah, a really rewarding, challenging, but amazing experience. Kind of. Does that do?
That does. Very cheesy,
If,
but we like it. And I'm going to go for one more because I am genuinely interested to see what your answer is to this one because this is for those that haven't been on a Bike the UK from Us trip before. We sleep either campsites or sometimes we use community halls or church halls to help kind of ensure that as much money that's raised can go to the cause as possible. Outside in a tent or sleeping indoors in a community hall, Tommy? What's your preferred mode of sleeping on a Bike the UK from Us trip? Controversial one.
that's a tricky one. Do you know what? Before the start of the 2023 trip season, it would have been in a church hall. But camping's grown on me. I quite like my tent now.
Nice. He's learned to love camping on a tent under in nature. There we go. So yeah. So amazing to chat, Tommy. Thanks so much for your time. And as we said earlier, if you've got a story from the last 10 years of Bike the UK from us that you would want to share with us and with anyone that's listening, please do get in touch. If you've managed to find this podcast via any of the different platforms we're going to try and put it out on, please give it a share, pass it on if there's someone you think would enjoy listening. And best of all, if you are looking forward to next summer as we head in towards the off season, as we call it, or the autumn or winter, then please have a look at our website, biketheukfroms.org, and have a look at the routes. And if you are ready for a challenge, get yourself signed up for one of the trips next year. In the meantime, as Tommy said, we've got our 130,000 kilometers in December challenge. So even if you're not ready to pull the trigger and commit to coming on a trip with us next year, you can get involved as much as or as little as you can later on in December. Again, keep your eyes peeled for all the information on that. Tommy, it's been wonderful to chat.
It's been great. Yeah, it's been great to share a bit of my experience with the charity. And yeah, thank you for having me on.
And thank you for everyone for listening. And we hope you have a wonderful day wherever you are, and whatever you're doing. And we look forward to hopefully seeing you out on a ride soon.